So yeah, it's like all I'm trying to say is, right now we're in this like this attempt, like you said, it's like two worlds colliding, and it's more than two. It's many. It's this multicultural explosion. Sure. And the problem is you can't actually have people live multiculturally. It's literally impossible. The culture is that. So yeah, we have no culture. There is a lack of culture because we're trying to have this diverse multiculturality. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong or there's anything impossible about people from different areas in the world all living together. Yeah. Diversity has strengths in certain areas. But Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone is like a kind of like a philosophical book. He did a study. I'm kind of going left field here, but he did a study. Basically, he found that people, when they try to live multiculturally, there's no actual positive impact from different cultures or different places in the world all living together. The only differences are that people who live in the more multicultural places, they watch TV more, and it was one other like kind of random negative thing that people do in those multicultural situations. Yeah. I think it was something maybe to do with higher crime in some aspect, but I wish I could remember. Anyway, the point is, like, you can't have multiple cultures living together because a culture is by definition the thing that we all agree upon. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe a long time ago, America had a very ingrained culture, like say the time of World War II, when everybody was kind of on the same journey and, okay, we're here, we're together, we're America. We agree on the flag. We might disagree on, a lot of different things, but we are together. We are one culture. Today, there's this smash of the Christian worldview and the secular worldview and many different cultures, and it ends up with no culture in a way, right?
Yeah, but it's interesting because, like what you're saying, there's a culture everywhere, and it might be a mashup of different things, but it ends up being something that you can define. Like every nation does have its own culture. And so I think that's why it feels like things are so chaotic in some ways, is because it feels like those worldviews are colliding in a way that, I mean, to be fair, neither of us have been old enough to even have been paying attention for very long, but it feels like, in looking back at history, it feels like we're in a place or in a time when those are colliding in a way that they haven't really in America before, or in a lot of the Western world. Right along with what you're saying, I just read this book about John Adams and how he was the defense attorney in the Boston Massacre trial. Do you know about the Boston Massacre?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So I think it was in 1769 or 70. So it was just a few years before America became America. Yeah. So the colonials the British troops were everywhere, all around, and they were occupying the colonies and running the show. Basically, it's still obviously a British colony before it had its independence. And tensions were boiling up to the surface for years before the actual war started, the Revolutionary War. But anyway, basically tensions bubbled over in Boston, and this angry mob of people were kind of like had this, I think it was 8 or 9 soldiers with their captain. They kind of like cornered in this spot, and I forget what they're so mad about, but these tensions were just boiling up. They were, obviously huge concerns were taxation without representation, things like that. But in the specific case, I don't remember exactly what led it to this point. Basically, the troops fired shots and they killed, I think, 5 people. So massacre is a little bit misleading because like way more than 5 people die every day in the United States right now. But the revolutionaries wanted to make this into like a really big story. So they released news headlines in newspapers and things calling it the Boston Massacre. So it's still called that. But anyway, all this to say, John Adams, who's a founding father, second president of the United States, was a defense attorney in this trial. And they held 2 separate trials. The first one was for the captain to determine whether he was guilty of murder of any kind or manslaughter, or what the deal was with him, if he had commanded his troops to fire, if there had been significant like provocation from the mob to actually like force his hand, basically, for the troops to defend themselves. So John Adams defended him. Captain Preston was his name, and then there were 8 soldiers who were on trial together. And I was so blown away. So the way the book is written, it talks about the events of the night of the Boston Massacre.
What book is this?
It's called John Adams Under Fire.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so it goes through the story of what actually happened, and then it goes through actually like the direct transcripts of both of the trials. And I was so interested to see how often God was brought into the conversation in the courtroom. Like, it felt like on like every few pages there was somebody mentioning like how they were appealing to the jury about these men's value as men who are created by God, and also their responsibility as as God-fearing men on the jury to be honest and to fully, I think this was something John Adams was saying. He was appealing to near the beginning of the trial, he was appealing to all the people in the jury, saying, you're God-fearing men, you need to hear all this out. I think some of them were really unfriendly towards the British presence in the United States, but he was still saying he believed so much in due process that he was appealing to them to, on those grounds. And it got brought up, like Moses got brought up, and how under the Mosaic law, if someone was convicted of manslaughter but not of like premeditated homicide, which is first degree murder, that even the Mosaic law, that distinction was drawn. And so John Adams also brought that up literally in his defense of these troops. He was saying like, hey, look back to the Bible, which we all believe in and look to as our like source of morality. He's appealing to that, to all these people in a courtroom. I mean, can you imagine that happening now?
That's amazing.
And he's appealing to that, saying like, hey, look, even back then, like God gave a distinction between premeditated murder and, provoked, like a responsive aggression that ends up in the other person dying. So that's where we get the distinction. And before in America, in British law, that's where they got the distinction from murder and manslaughter. So anyway, that was a little bit of a long explanation, but it's just so interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating to see back then how it's like exactly what you were saying earlier. Is it's like it used to be, hey, we're all functioning on this common ground of like, we believe in this, we believe in the Bible, we look to it as our source of morality, and we have we have this sense of like the fear of God, where we have to be honest in how we're doing this trial, in order to another thing that really stuck out that was on my mind was with perjury. Like the reason, I mean, I think the people still are, but you put your hand on the Bible and you swear that you're going to tell the truth. I mean, it's there because it's a reminder of God sees what you're doing, and if you lie, you are ultimately accountable to Him. And so that, I mean, having that be true all the way back then, it's just like
this old tradition.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's like, I mean, that's the foundation. And it actually like really meant something back then. And obviously to some people it still does. Yeah. But we're in that place of collision where it's like, traditions like that, it's just undeniable where they came from. But now we're colliding with, I mean, what do you do when you take all of that away and you don't have any fear of God and you don't think that you're ultimately accountable to Him? That's going to radically change how you operate your life, and specifically in that situation in a courtroom, for sure.